Welcome back to another Yale School of Management Careers webinar. My name is Cindy Cornell. I'm the career coach for working professionals. And I'm delighted to bring to you today a panel of fabulous executive recruiters. Our topic today is the state of hiring in 2022, perspectives from executive search. Despite the global disruption caused over the past 2 years resulting from COVID-19, business, hiring, and innovation has continued across industries. So today we're going to learn about current trends and dig into some questions about the current landscape and understand better how to really well set yourself up and set yourself apart from the crowd in a successful 2022 job search. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our panelists at a very high level and let them then go on to tell you a little bit more about themselves. And beyond that, we'll get into some questions. And I encourage all of our participants, please, to answer or ask questions in the Q&A. And we will get to those as appropriate, either directly into the Q&A or in conversation together with everyone. So Brian Joyce is here to represent healthcare because we have so many people from SOM in that space, and Brian's from Korn Ferry. Sarah Burley-Reed is really focusing in on finance and asset management. Sarah is coming to us today from New York City. Brian is actually in the town next to me. He's in Fairfield, Connecticut, to my Westport, Connecticut. Ellen Weinreb is, are you in on the West Coast today? Yes, and
yeah,
Ellen,
I'm in Berkeley, California.
Okay, fabulous. And Ellen is with Shelley on the West Coast. Ellen is speaking to us as an SOM graduate and also the owner of her own sustainability consulting firm. And then Shelley Fust, last but not least, is also joining us from Korn Ferry from LA. And in addition to sustainability, also has a number of other specializations around global energy and manufacturing. So with that, perhaps you'll introduce yourselves in the order that I shared you, and then we can get on with the program. So Brian.
Yes, thank you, Cindy. As Cindy had highlighted, my name is Brian Joyce. I'm in the healthcare practice at Korn Ferry. I just was looking at it, 24 years in executive search and in my 17th year at Korn Ferry. And I span the whole healthcare services practice, meaning providers, private equity-backed healthcare service disruptors, and payers, which is the health insurance segment. So happy to join the group today.
Great. And I'm Sarah Burley-Reed. Thank you so much, Cindy, for inviting us to join today. I'm with Spencer Stewart here in New York City, and I'm a partner in our asset and wealth management practice. So I spend all my time working with investment firms, both helping them with talent acquisition as well as talent strategy in general and leadership advisory work. And I've been at Spencer Stewart for 20 years, always focused in this space, and just delighted to be here with the Yale community again.
I'm Ellen Weinreb, and I have my own search firm called Weinreb Group, and we focus on sustainability and ESG placements. Largely, our clients are in the corporate sector, large corporations, and I am SOM 98.
So Shelley Fust, and we said hopefully not last but not least, Cindy. And it's certainly a pleasure to have the opportunity once again to speak to this amazing group from Yale. As Cindy mentioned, I am one of our global co-leads and one of the founders of our sustainability and ESG practice here at Korn Ferry that we've had in place now for almost 15 years and continue to expand significantly. In fact, it's probably one of the largest growth areas for the firm here, especially in the last 2 years, not only on the executive search side, but also in our advisory consulting practice, helping corporations, not-for-profit organizations, and a very diverse set of organizations around sustainability and ESG, from organizational strategy, compensation, around these issues, but a very wide range of sustainability and ESG initiatives, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as Cindy mentioned, I wear a few different hats. I'm also part of our energy and infrastructure practice and work with the energy utility sector, both public and private, Do a lot of work in the renewable energy space, both with the energy development companies, including some of the newer technologies like offshore wind. A lot of that's going on for many of you right there in your backyard in the Northeast offshore, and then also do work in the private equity space around all of these areas as well. So it's a pretty diverse practice, and delighted to have the opportunity to meet with you this morning and share some perspectives from those areas.
Fabulous. Thank you all again for being here. And I really appreciate the fact that we've come together a few times now through the pandemic, talking about the very first time we did this, it was literally on a dime. It was intended to be an in-person event with our current MBA for executive students, and all of a sudden the world shut down and we flipped to, this was my first webinar with the Yale School of Management with this panel a couple of years ago now. So we have had consistent, kind of uncertainty relative to the pandemic. I'm curious, the world has evolved in so many other ways as well, with respect to issues of climate crisis and supply chain and diversity and inclusion and racial unrest and so many things. I'm curious, what, if anything, have you seen in terms of impacts to executive hiring decisions? What companies are looking for? Has that changed over the last few years as a result of so many different things, kind of going on at once that's requiring more than just, functional firm leadership? Sarah, okay.
Go ahead.
Sarah, I see you nodding, and then.
Okay, you start, Shelley. I'll add on.
Well, yeah, no, I was just going to say that, certainly in the area of sustainability and ESG, and I know many of us work in the same space, but all of the issues that you've mentioned, Cindy, have certainly created much more visibility in the sustainability and ESG sector overall. And you referenced earlier one of the white papers that we put out earlier this year, talking about the rise of the chief sustainability executive. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the organizations are beginning to see these roles as very strategic roles at the highest business level. So we're seeing these positions, come to the attention of the CEOs and boards. You're seeing new board committees being formed. It's also becoming a much more robust topic of board governance, both from a risk and opportunity standpoint. And we're seeing organizations, even those that maybe historically had been perceived as some of the leaders in this space, also questioning what they really should be doing around organizational structure and strategy and the leadership competencies that are needed in some of these roles. So we're seeing I think tremendous momentum around all the broad issues, especially when you think about ESG, the environment, social governance, climate justice, environmental justice, all of those issues. And those are all creating interesting job opportunities in all types of organizations.
So you're seeing new roles emerging that didn't exist before. So there perhaps isn't a roadmap and there aren't clear metrics for success, which makes both your job challenging and the job of the candidates trying to figure out where they fit challenging, because they're not filling something. Sarah, did you want to add on to that from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was going to make a broader comment just about the hiring environment. So I don't think you were talking about how we first got together as a group here a couple of years ago, and I don't think any of us would have predicted the health of the labor market at this point in time. I mean, there has just been the healthy markets, the economy, the strength of the economy has really led to a high volume of hiring overall. As has the great resignation and early retirements. And so the market is very competitive for talent. Organizations are fighting. There is a war for talent right now. And especially as Shelley alluded to, there's a war for diversity talent, because a new light wonderfully has been shining upon the lack of diversity in a lot of organizations, both in the executive ranks as well as on boards. And so this has led to a keen focus on the diversification of teams. And I would say also a keen focus on people who can be truly adaptable in an ever-changing environment. So the pandemic environment has taught us all that things change every day. You can't predict what's going to happen next. And so you need leaders who can constantly adapt and pivot, and be open to new ways of operating. So I think that's been the biggest sort of change that we've seen, and that crosses a lot of different functions and industries. It really does.
So honing your stories around resilience, around your adaptability, and even your ability to lead distributed teams, which I think would bring me to another question that I know has been coming up, and I'm seeing regularly in the news: coming back to work, not coming back to work, hybrid, permanent remote. I've seen some people talk about this diversity and hybrid or remote environments is allowing so many more people to be considered for roles, which increases the talent pool, available talent pool, though it also creates different challenges for your leadership style with regard to how we've managed teams in the past. So would love your points of view on where that's going in terms of, and Brian, I see you kind of chomping on the bit. Yeah, I know from a healthcare standpoint, there's a whole lot you can't do remotely.
Absolutely. And there's so many sort of pieces within that statement that you made. But yes, talent, it's in great demand. So candidates have multiple offers. So we're seeing a compression of the process associated with search within healthcare. And we have clients that are both fully distributed going into that, as well as in healthcare, there's a need to keep that culture and keep people in person. So it comes down to the type of organization, but agility, data and analytics, it's very transformative and disruptive right now. And healthcare is the example of the haves and have-nots. The haves are the health insurance plans are flush with cash. So they're spending a lot of time around data analytics, transformation, going to the cloud. And I think it'll help us as a society a couple of years down the road. And then the have-nots are the providers that are being financially squeezed when they have to eliminate the elective procedures and the supply chain and everything else. So we're seeing an evolution in what clients are looking for in candidates, in that agility and being able to remotely manage individuals. And one just needs to be a little bit more flexible, but very, very interesting times. No question.
It's been fascinating to be a fly on the wall with employers when it comes to that question of remote versus in the office. And right when the pandemic hit, it was a scary time. I just remember doing interviews, and you could hear in Manhattan where you could hear the ambulances in the background, like, the person's like, my candidate's like, I'm right here at the hospital. I live across the street from the hospital, and I'm hearing these ambulances all the time. It was a scary time. And at the same time, to talk about switching a job, right? Like at the beginning of that pandemic. And then there's been this great reshuffle, this great resignation, and there's this power play between the candidates and the employers. So there's been a time in the past 2 years where the employers are saying, all right, so after everybody got their vaccine, we all want you back in the office. And when we're recruiting, that means you need to be willing to move to wherever, Phoenix, Arizona, and you're getting in. At first people are saying, I'm not going to move to Berlin in a pandemic. And towards when everybody's getting their vaccination, there's definitely openness and willingness to move. But then these candidates, are leaving. The employees are leaving the job, and now we're definitely hearing the employers are much more open to a hybrid environment. I think right now I'm hearing 3 days a week. So you don't want somebody living across the country, but you want them living in the vicinity so that they can come to the office a little bit. But it's just been interesting to hear that, understand and see the power structure between employers and employees through the course of the pandemic.
And it sounds like it's still a struggle for employers in figuring out what's the right next
It's
step.
not over.
Yeah.
Pandemic's not over.
No. I'm curious also about the company's needs shifting as people are going through, the one term I haven't heard us talk about today is the great reassessment, where people are saying, oh, these things that I've done all these years maybe aren't what I want to be doing in the future. Do you see, I'm assuming the answer will be yes, but I'd love to hear your background. Why? Is this a great time for people who are reassessing and wanting to make a change to do that? And what hints or suggestions do you have for them where, some of these jobs that they may be interested in moving into didn't exist 3 years ago, or they really are seeking to make a pivot into something new? What are you looking for as executive search professionals from them that is going to inspire you to kind of put them forward for something that they haven't specifically done exactly that way before?
Maybe let me take that, Cindy. I think the challenge is, and I'd be interested to hear from my other colleagues here, for what we do on the executive search side, it's much more difficult for us to really help individuals who are making that kind of a full pivot. Because typically, as we are looking for someone to fill a very specific role with a client, it's much more difficult to convince a client to take a look at someone who has none of the experiences yet that they're looking for. So there's sort of a different process there, I think, if someone's really looking to change careers and how you do that. And I typically am counseling people around, that's where using your network, really, thinking about who do you know in these businesses who know you and know what you can do. And they are probably a little bit more likely to be able to see the skill sets and create the opportunities to make those kinds of pivots, where I think for most of us in the work that we're doing, we are looking for pretty specific skills and experiences and accomplishments that make it a little bit more difficult for us to be the ones to help someone make that kind of a pivot. But at the same time, to your point, we are seeing a tremendous number of brand new roles. I look at in the sustainability area, carbon accounting, with every company creating very robust carbon goals, the need to have individuals who, whether it's the people who are creating the systems that are looking at how do we track carbon, or the individuals who are working with, broad organizations to set goals and then create strategies in order to ensure that they meet those goals. Those are roles that weren't there 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago. So, there are new opportunities in new, I think new environments that create some opportunities for people to come in and say, okay, that's, maybe have my background in accounting, and maybe that's an area and that's a way for me to transition into some of this work around sustainability and climate.
Yes, I would agree with what Shelley has shared, in the sense that for us in our roles, we are so often looking for people with a very specific kind of experience. So it's hard for us to convince one of our clients that someone who's never done it before can do it. That said, I would say because the market is so hot and there are so many opportunities, there's such demand for talent, that it actually is an incredible opportunity for people to get in the door with something they haven't done before. And that doesn't mean they're going to get in the door through us, but through your own network or your own sleuthing and your hard work and pounding the pavement, you can get in the door in a way you haven't been able to in the past. So for example, for people who took a career break, this is a great time to get back into it. If you took time off for your family, or for people who do really want to make a switch into a different career or a different industry, but you're willing to start, kind of start over a little bit, go in at a lower level, but it's worth it to you because you want to make that switch. It is a good time to do these things. It just might not be through, one of the big search firms.
And I would add to that too, in the sense that a relationship with a search executive is a marathon, and it's built with trust and time. So it's answering a phone call from a networking perspective, although you're gainfully employed and you have no desire to make a transition or pivot. And if you're conversely the executive looking to make a change, maybe engage your mentors in the organization and see who they've closely aligned through their career from an executive search perspective. Because to add to what Sarah's saying, that I have a lot of clients in healthcare that are creating new roles. And so therefore there's no two candidate backgrounds and pathways that are the same. So there might be an opportunity. And if you know a search executive and they understand what your capabilities are and away from the functional title, then that's where the creativity really comes out. And then we try to have an out-of-box candidate with each of our searches. So the client says they need X, and we know they kind of need Y. So we're going to give them X and a little Y, and then we're going to make sure that they have an alternate candidate. And you'll be surprised, more often than not, they come through this evolution through the process of determining that they really don't need X. And so, but if you're unknown to a search partner, then you're not part of that discussion, if that makes sense.
I have also recognizing this evolution over the last year that at first we were really hard pressed to find. It felt like for me, it was market failure. Like it felt like there weren't candidates to meet the needs. Like, for example, very specifically in private equity, heads of ESG, there's only so many people who have private equity head of ESG experience. And we're not necessarily, as recruiters, doing a service to the world by playing musical chairs, moving them from one PE firm to another. And in a world where there's a growing demand for the number of heads of ESG at PE firms, we need to do our part in being open to other sources of candidates. And there was a time a year ago where the employers weren't so open to that. They were like, no, I want you to source somebody who's a PE, ESG, they're looking for that. And now I've got clients who are, I pick up the phone, clients are saying, I've been looking for this position for 2 years, or we made an offer to somebody and then they rescinded, and they said yes and they rescinded, or there's the competing offer. There's so many challenges in getting somebody in the door that they're coming to us saying, we're desperate, we need help. We're definitely a lot busier than we were a year ago, and they're willing to work with us. And when a candidate has a competing offer, we say, I'm sorry about that, and at the same time I say I'm not surprised, and they agree. So I think the employers are also being, and I like, Sarah, what you had to say a lot about, I think there is an opportunity for me. I used to, when I was coaching job seekers, I would say, well, the next job you do should be a little pivot. There's not a market opportunity to make a big pivot. And I think now, given where the labor market is, there is an opportunity. And I definitely support what Sarah had to say on that.
Nice. I liked what Brian also said. It's a marathon. So you may not be ready or available to help them with their search today. You may be able to, though, give them some hints about what gaps are, where they might fill in or learn more about certain things, so that you might be in a better position to help them for their next job or the job after that. And I would hope also that those job seekers would also remember that they can potentially be helpful to you. So I understand I'm not the right candidate. Who are you looking for? If I know them, I'm happy to make their introduction. And I think that's something that a lot of people forget, that, this is a two-way street. And if they help you, they will be more memorable to you as well. Shelley, did you want to add something to that last conversation?
I was also going to say too that, if individuals are looking to make those kind of moves, really take a look at the websites for the search firms that are represented here and others. You'll be able to get a really good idea of the kind of demand, what kind of roles are out there. Really take a look, do your due diligence in the areas that are of interest to you, and take a look at the skill sets and experiences that are being asked for by the clients. I think everyone has made the point, our job is to sort of expand the thinking of our clients. They maybe want to be more narrow. Our job is to be more expansive. And especially in this market where, I mean, Ellen, you're so right. There's so much more demand for talent for these roles than exists, exactly in those roles. So that's where we have to really play that role and do around having them think more creatively about the segments where these people may come from, really being able to understand the particular competencies that do translate and look at it somewhat, in a large extent from a competency standpoint versus just what industry have they been in, what roles have they been in. It's more about what have they done, how have they done it, and how can they translate that and apply that to a new role. So, I think, again, there's a lot of information out there on the executive search websites about the positions, about the trends that we see in the industry. And I think, taking advantage of that is also another opportunity in addition to using that network.
Yeah, I encourage people all the time to figure out, and I talked about this in a webinar earlier this year, game-changing job search resources. Who are the experts in your, not just the recruiters, but who are the consulting thought leaders, who are, kind of the leading businesses, who are the up and comers, what are they all saying and posting, and to be aware of all of that, because you may not get that role in, kind of company A, but if you have market knowledge of company, A, B, and C, that might make you really differently marketable to somebody else. And that's just by your being informed. So awesome advice. I'm curious, if you think back over the last, year or two, you each will have met people that you hadn't known before. What are some characteristics of really great reach outs where you're delighted to make a connection with a new contact, and maybe they're not ideal for any of your current roles, but what are some of the kind of the best practices in terms of saying hello to you for the first time?
So the first thing that comes to mind for me is when you meet someone who has so much energy and enthusiasm for where their industry is headed and so much curiosity about it, right? So it's one thing to reach out to us and say, oh, I'm thinking about a change. I'd like to do this instead of that, or I want to do it in a different organization or something like that. But when someone reaches out and they tell you about themselves, but they also say, I'm really keen on where the private debt market is headed and what the opportunities are for investors to invest and gain traction for their portfolios in this new environment. And I want to be part of, this niche part of it because I think I bring these skills to the table or something like that. But, just showing some real insight about where an industry or a portion of an industry is headed and how they can be part of it, either transforming it or evolving it, or just contributing to it in one way or another in a forceful and invigorated fashion. That's what really stands out to me. And also people who are, this is just a very tactical and simple thing, but some people have been shy and almost a little hermit-like in this pandemic environment. And others are more aggressive about embracing the new environment that we're in and how one needs to operate. So whether that means, I'd love to, if you have time for a Zoom chat, even 15 minutes, I'd love to meet you. People who are really embracing this environment, figuring out ways to get themselves out there, build relationships, et cetera. Those people will flourish in the new environment that we have.
Great advice. I love the 15-minute meeting, 10 or 15 minutes. If you're really thoughtful, it's a great taste to know if you want to actually continue that relationship and continue on. And I love also that the clarity you were talking about, that somebody is aware of what that niche is within that market. They've done their research, they're informed, and they're showing up curious and also thoughtful about what it is that they bring to it. That's work that it's hard work, frankly, for anybody to go through, and it's the ticket into to finding roles through you. So thank you for saying it so clearly.
Well, it's the hard work, but it's also being yourself, right? Just not being
Mm.
afraid to be yourself and demonstrate your own passion. People just need to remember to do that.
Yeah,
And if
authentic.
you're going to get there through multiple channels, I think it's important to add, since your audience probably wants some specifics. So doing the research, finding us on LinkedIn, knowing that we are a good match, and then using those characters that you have in the invite to explain why you want to connect, and or having an individual or shared contact make an introduction. So warm introductions get 100% response, in my world at least, and then cold introductions, if it's germane to my area of expertise, I'll accept it. But then to give that 15 minutes, there really needs to be a tie, because going back to this whole pandemic and the hiring, this is the busiest I've personally ever been in my 24-year career. So, but I still block out time to have those meetings, but I can't do 10 a week. So you can be concise, be compelling, and we're always happy to expand the network.
And another piece to add to that is in that call to essentially regurgitate your LinkedIn profile doesn't really add value. So I always start those calls and I say, how can I help you? Like, we have 15 minutes, how can I help you? And if they have an answer to that question on how I can help them in those 15 minutes, then we both get more out of the call. Also, we're all zoomed out. I'm zoomed out, I'll speak for me. And so I am sensitive to that. And I think another avenue is the LinkedIn feed, because I think a lot of us do go through, I don't know how much time, but I definitely spend a little bit of time each day going through my LinkedIn feed. It's amazing how many people are changing jobs. Congratulations, new job. But you really, yeah, it's like, one, you get a taste of what's out there, but also if there's that mutual connection or somebody who's popping up that's kind of new to my network, then it reminds me of them as potential candidates.
Nice. So when people are participating in those LinkedIn feeds. So, and hopefully this is a hint that I give to people. You can see in the activity what you've said, so have it be a little bit more compelling than just congrats, because that doesn't speak much about your brand. It's an opportunity to be seen by people like you who have an interest in the area that person's just moved into. That's a great piece of advice. Thank you.
Yeah, don't click on the pre-populated response.
Yeah, not a great way to stand out if you look like everybody else. Thank you. Shelley, do you have thoughts about what you found really, kind of attractive to reach out?
Sure. Well, I think it's exactly what everyone said. I said, make sure that it's relevant. It's very easy to tell if someone's done their homework and they really understand the areas that you're involved in, and they understand our business. So be concise, be relevant. And then, like Brian and others, I think we're all very willing and ready to take the calls that make sense and meet new people. And, we never know when those may be our next placement or our next client. So we are always very willing and ready to make those if it makes sense. And if not, pass them along if we see information that's relevant.
Nice. A question just came up in the Q&A about how important is LinkedIn to the job searching exposure to you guys? Is that where you're looking for candidates, or what are your other sources for candidates? Ellen, I'm seeing you nodding vigorously that LinkedIn is.
Yeah, even when somebody sends me their resume, I still go to their LinkedIn. It's a way it's a way to look at all the candidates. Like, we're looking at a slate of candidates. Like, let's look at all of their LinkedIns. So it's super valuable.
Yeah, I mean, people should assume that every recruiter out there on the planet uses LinkedIn consistently and vigorously, leverages the information on LinkedIn to make decisions, make assessments, connect with other people, to get references on you, etc. So being a presence on LinkedIn is super important. I always say, I mean, people may have different views than I do, that it's good to have some level of detail on LinkedIn, but not so much that you look desperate. Because, if you have like 25, references or something, people start to wonder what's going on here. Why does this person have all these references listed? So the basics and a little bits of detail on what you do today and what you've done in the past is important.
And I would say too that, I mean, LinkedIn, clearly is one of the leading resources. It's not the exclusive resource. At the same time, I would also make sure that everyone understand that all of your social media and social, networking is visible. And that does become a critical part of our referencing for candidates. So, be aware that all of your social media that's in the public domain becomes a part of that professional referencing that's done.
Excellent. Excellent. Is there anything that makes a LinkedIn profile stand out to you, or anything that would make a LinkedIn profile perhaps be one that you would pass by? You were saying a moment ago that we're comparing all of the candidates via their LinkedIn profiles. What's going to make one kind of rise to the top versus fall out the bottom?
I think for me, it's process of elimination, meaning typos, all caps, 3 of your last jobs, all to present. People forget that when they put their new job, they don't change their old. So attention to detail on your own profile goes a long way, because our clients are also independently researching the candidates we bring to the table. And that's going to just, give them a little bad first impression.
Inappropriate photographs.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said inappropriate photographs.
Okay.
In your profile.
Do they need photographs?
That the employer will Google you, right? Like,
yeah.
Any candidate should make that assumption. And if there are, for professional roles, if there are videos of presenting and they're good quality, that can help a long way. We've been experimenting more with the video interview, a recorded video. And I find that the client will lock in on that more than their bona fides of the resume. So it can go both ways. In some ways it makes the position, the process more efficient, but it can make a big influence. But for the most part, it's also how the candidates connect in their interview on Zoom, like what's going on in the background, and are you showing up professionally on those Zoom calls? And is your camera here or here? I'll have candidates that are looking at me on a Zoom, but they're not. So having that down is valuable.
Nice. Another question that popped up is around social media presence in general. I know some people I've talked to have very limited social media presence, and they just don't prefer to have it. Does that hurt them in the job search process from your perspective? I'm seeing a nod.
Well, if you don't want to be on Facebook, I don't think that hurts you. But I have had candidates who have a fundamental reason against LinkedIn, and that hurts them. Meaning they don't want a presence on LinkedIn, or they don't want a photo on LinkedIn. And so it's like, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's a little different. I mean, I think LinkedIn's more informational, right? You really should be on it. But other forms of social media, I don't think it's important for you to be posting or commenting or anything like that. That's not like a requirement. Unless I suppose the role has something to do with being in social media, in which case one would want to see evidence of one's skill with social media.
Indeed.
To Ellen's point, around the recorded, whether it's recorded interviews or even recordings, for certain roles, and especially, some of our joint work around sustainability and ESG, that ability to be in the public domain, to communicate, very comprehensive, strategies and issues in the large public domain is very important to the clients. And we are seeing that, in many cases, we're using those video links as a part of our presentation of candidates at the very beginning. So that kind of information is being utilized more and more. To Ellen's point around even using recorded interviews, I think we've all had to kind of experience, a little bit of different things over these last, 2.5 years. Certainly with some board searches, CEO searches. We have done recorded interviews for some of the preliminary part of the process until such time as they can actually meet in person. So again, recognize that this is a brave new world, and we are having to think about how do we use technology very differently in the interview and presentation process.
And also not meeting, interviewing and taking a job, not ever having shaken the hand and met in person your employer, been to the office. That's the new world we're in.
Yeah, and that just speaks to how important behavioral interviewing is on both sides to make sure that there's a proper fit. And really, it goes back to, I think, Sarah, you said it earlier, know thyself. You really have to know yourself and in what environments you thrive in to be able to make that selection for yourself if you're not meeting them in person.
In fact, Cindy, that comes back to even one of the conversations we had at the beginning, which is around the know thyself. There are plenty of opportunities out there, potentially with companies that individuals work with or out in the public domain, to do leadership assessments. If you haven't had the opportunity to go through that process, to really be able to understand and articulate what your leadership competencies are, and maybe where there are opportunities to develop or be able to discuss what your strengths and weaknesses are. I think that's something that really can be beneficial in this process, to really be able to talk about competencies like agility, social leadership, and be able to be credible in terms of how you really assess your own skills and competencies in those areas.
Yeah, assessments are a great way to find language to frame those conversations, and it's common language. So yeah, it's super helpful for folks that want to make that investment of time. Yeah, I know for a few assessments that I've worked with people with just having that framing and having a way to speak about it is helpful, because those superpowers that they have, those strengths, they may not see them as strengths until they've actually, kind of seen them line up that way. So thank you for that reminder. I see a question about more about diversity and inclusion, and it talks about gender, race, origin, professional background, educational background, personal values, preferences. There's so many different ways to see diversity. Is there a way to, kind of present yourself and those elements of diversity that you have most effectively? What stands out to you if you see someone who's truly diverse, where that you're inclined to bring them in as that candidate to kind of shake things up a bit? How do you identify which person you're going to do that with?
Well, I would offer two responses to that. The first is, I think that it's important to think about, what makes you unique. What qualities do you bring that are special and potentially different? And when I say qualities, features, any element of who you are and where you're from and what you look like and all of those things. What do you bring that might be different and additive? And if you're looking at a specific organization and you're interested in a specific organization or a specific industry, then of course you want to emphasize those elements of who you are. And you can do that by, in your interview, talking about your experience and your background and your upbringing and whatever it might be. Or you can do it on your resume or on your LinkedIn. I think in general, there is a great opportunity to share more about who you are through different signals on your resume or LinkedIn, notes, associations you have with different organizations, committees you've been on, nonprofits you care about, social causes that you're passionate about. When you list those things or talk about those things, it tells people more about who you are, and therefore what you could bring that might be different from what they already have on their team.
And I like the point you made that speaks to, it's relevant to the company, right? It's not diversity for diversity's sake. It's an understanding of what the organization is about and how that perspective is going to enrich the organization and help them to serve whatever their purpose is more effectively, either more effectively or more expansively, potentially, if we're talking about a growth opportunity. So the relevancy and understanding how to link that in is important.
Yes.
We are getting more questions from our clients about like being sure to ensure that we are presenting a representative slate, a diverse slate. And we ask our clients about how they want to support adding to their culture and what is going to support the direction that the company and the employer is going. I do find that there's some candidates for some reason don't want to disclose, like if you're LGBTQ, maybe you're not out. And my only encouragement out there is that the more that the client or the employer can know about who you are, the better that you and them can assess, because you want somebody who feels comfortable bringing their whole self to work. And so if they're able to just disclose that, then it implies that they're going to be feeling more comfortable at the company when they join it. And so that's just something to consider for people in terms of disclosing. And yeah, it's a fascinating field out there. I envy Shelley, who does searches specifically in that area.
Well,
I would
maybe
say
you'll
we're
do
also
more.
some of the more challenging ones, for all these reasons as well.
Yeah, it certainly has been a dynamic couple of years. I'm looking at another question, speaking about, what makes it was in regards to Brian's comment about the marathon and relationship being important. With so many inbounds, I'm curious, the question says, about what you've seen as more effective to stand out. Example, infographic cover letter that has a summary info stats, or are you really looking at a more traditional framing when you see cover letters and application materials? I know that when we talk to our full-time students and recruiters are coming in and they're expecting resume books and everybody's resume is in the same form, it's really nice to have it. You can find the information where you want it. If you are in the roles that you're looking for, are you liking some of the more creative, resume highlight templates, or are you preferring to see something that's more traditional that you could pass right along to an employer potentially?
Well, I'll touch on that. So if you're reaching out via LinkedIn, you don't have the opportunity to have all of those infographics. So it's getting the connection. And then once you're connected, you have access to our email, and then following up, then I don't mind that additional information and data. And whether it's in the form of a bio or a unique resume, typically speaking, most of the big firms, when you're in a senior executive search process, we have to reformat your resume to our standard formatting to bring consistency. But so that is a tool to stand out amongst us, and not necessarily a tool that will ultimately stand out amongst our clients, but it's important to have stood out. So I'm open to that. We find bios can be a lot more insightful because resumes are delineation of accomplishments and or statistics around P&L or scale, scope, and teams they've led, where a bio can get into a little bit more behind reasons and what's drivers and traits and passions of the individual.
I would say too, that for most people, you need to have multiple versions. At some point in a conversation with most of us, we will still need to see the detailed chronological resume. In fact, we just had an interview with someone, and as we went through the process, there were several gaps. It's just like, oh yeah, well, I did this. I went into my own consulting for a while. I just didn't feel like it made sense to put it on a resume. It makes more sense to actually have the chronological to show if there were, pathways out for a period of time. Show that, note that when you get into a detailed conversation, as opposed to just having us guess about what happened. So the more information that's there at the appropriate part of the process. So again, the ability to have sort of multiple ways to engage in this with maybe initial bios, but always have that real detailed chronological resume handy.
Nice. I totally appreciate that you were looking for appropriate documents at the appropriate time in the relationship that have been tailored for the specific role you're talking about.
Correct.
One size does not fit all. It never has, and it won't in the future. Another thing I heard recently, which was a hint that I gave to folks, people lose elements of their resume because they cut them off from, we didn't need that for this last version of my resume, and they lose these ideas and these stories. And as the world is evolving and we're asked at senior levels to take on responsibility for more broad reaching, elements of the business, it may be that you actually had functional expertise or experience in something in an early job out of school that you can leverage later on. So to not lose those older elements that were not important for this job, they may well be important for the next job. So honor all of your stories. Don't just share all of them all the time. So awesome. I'm conscious of time, and we're coming up towards the top of the hour. I'm curious, before we kind of wrap up, are there any bits of advice, and I think people always find this very memorable, things to please not do when you're reaching out to executive recruiters or in job search interviews generally, that you've seen or heard that you want to remind people to avoid?
Happy to start there, Cindy, just because I had given that some thought. I think we are all, it is a team process. We are there really to benefit both our client and the candidate. So make sure that if situations change, and we know they do, and now more than ever, to Ellen and to the point of many others, there are multiple offers, there are multiple engagements. We recognize that we may be going down a path. We may not have a lot of information yet from our client, but if as a candidate, all of a sudden your situation changes, you get another offer, you're considering another opportunity, let your recruiter know that so that we can, appropriately communicate with the client if that's what's needed, but so that there's an awareness of the process. So, because the hardest thing is these are difficult searches, and to be blindsided by all of a sudden finding out, oh, by the way, I took another offer, for someone who's an active candidate is, it's not something that allows you to maybe necessarily stay in that marathon, for the next job.
Nice. So
I would just add to that. I do find, and it's related to what Shelley shared. I find that in this Zoom environment, many people are just taking things more casually. They think, oh, I had a Zoom interview. Oh, well, that's fine. I Zoom with people all the time. Or I told you I was interested, or I told you I wasn't interested, or I mentioned that I had this other offer, or whatever it is. People are just more casual about things. They're not taking things quite as seriously and being as proper and formal and committed in their interactions as they should be. And it's really important to remember that having a Zoom interview with a potential employer is just as important and just as formal as it ever was when you used to go and meet them in their office. And you really need to treat every interaction, every relationship you're building in the same way that you always did. Just because things are faster and happening more often and et cetera, it doesn't mean they aren't just as serious. So it's just important for all of us to remember. That goes for what Shelley was saying about showing your commitment to a discussion. It goes for when you're on a Zoom, don't answer phone calls because you think other people are answering phone calls. Or I know that in the beginning of COVID, we all thought it was so humorous if someone's child walked in, or you went to answer the doorbell or whatever. Well, we've kind of gotten past that. And, now when you have a Zoom meeting, it's a real meeting. It's not just a casual interaction. So remembering these things, every interaction you have with a potential employer, with a recruiter, with and network and contact, you're building your reputation. So remember that you want to be building a good reputation.
I love that you're sharing the what not to do in the frame of the how you want to conduct yourself. So thank you for that. Ellen, did you have something you wanted to add there, or?
No, I think Sarah and Shelley and going back to Brian, I think we're all saying it. It is a marathon, and you know, and these relationships will continue in one way or another. So a potential candidate is a potential employer, or the other way around, or a referral. And so, so you want, as Sarah is saying, you want to maintain these relationships for the long run.
And I love that you're all sharing that you work for the employers and you highly value the relationships you have with the candidates, because without the candidates, you have no business. So, so for the candidates to show up with the respect and appreciation for you that you do with them is not too much to ask at all.
And leverage your search partner for a coach during the process. Oftentimes we've seen that if an executive, oh, I got this. I know I have an interview with this so-and-so, see so-and-so tomorrow. I've got it. I don't need the advice and counsel. It's a shortfall. I had a candidate recently show up late and not come on camera with the CHRO. And the entire leadership thought this person had the most relevant experience. They were fantastic on a resume. Absolutely did not go to offer. It was very disappointing, because you can't have an off day, because then they're going to feel that, you know, you have to be on during the process. You have to be prepared. You have to be on time. You have to turn on camera. If your dog barks in the background, no one's going to care. But if you are late, be remorseful and be true and be normal. But definitely ask for any what areas to touch upon, what areas to avoid. The search partner has multiple conversations on a weekly basis with the client, and there's a lot more that we just can't digest with you in a matter of only a couple of short meetings. But we'll give you what's salient and relevant for the individual you're meeting on that specific time of day, and trust me, it helps.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. I see we've got one more question I'd love to just put out there, and I know we only have a few minutes. C-suite roles or CEO roles, when people are moving up into that space, they haven't held that role before, and you may be looking at them to elevate. Is there any very quick advice you can share for those folks that are seeking to step into that C-suite for the first time, so that they're well respected and sought after by you?
I would say be confident and don't be intimidated. It's just another job. It's just another step in your career, and feel like, you know, and you're ready for it.
Ellen, I think you couldn't have said that more succinctly. If you don't show up believing that you're already that role, you won't get it. So I think that's probably, and it would be different for any, you know, different responsibilities for any of those chief level roles. You have to believe you can do it. You have to know what it is, and you have to be confident. Shelley?
And I was going to say, come with a point of view. Come with a point of view about what you will do, how you will do it, and how what that brings adds value to the business, to the board, to the shareholders. So come with a really, you know, a specific point of view, and how you will contribute in the position, and how your experience really brings the collective knowledge that's needed.
Yeah, and that also speaks to you're informed about that business.
Right.
And if you're in an organization and you don't feel you're in that hopper through your annual review, definitely express an interest. There's assessment, there's coaching, there's a lot of support that organizations have to make sure that you are prepared for that, and you're in the conversation of succession. So that's the internal aspect, and the external aspect is everything that everyone touches.
Yeah, I think it's really a matter of balancing confidence with humility, right? There's a lot of research that shows that great leaders actually have a lot of humility and know they always have more to learn, which takes us back to the beginning of our conversation around what makes people successful in this ever-changing environment, and it's being adaptable and being a learner. So great leaders, great executives are great learners. So having that confidence and humility will really take you far.
I can't say thank you enough Sarah, you just put a bow on our time together today. This has been a lot of fun. I hope we have a very different conversation in a year where we're not still talking about pandemics. And I can't wait. I'm very excited about what this next year brings for all of us. So thank you again for being here today. Thanks for answering questions live and in the chat. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Thank you for
Cindy.
hosting.